The purpose of this video is to give the first-year players and parents some basic information related to the game. It's very important that all players watch the video prior to the first outdoor field practice, as it covers a lot of the things that coaches may not spend much time on, if any, before the first game. Equipment. All this is required equipment, and the player will not be allowed to play or practice if they show up without it. Please take a moment to read through all the items that are required. The field. Let's take a few minutes to go over all the different areas of the lacrosse field. The midfield line. This separates the field into two halves and runs from one sideline to the next. Restraining lines. Again, they run from sideline to sideline, but they break the field into even smaller segments that we will discuss later. The box. The crease. The crease is an 18-foot diameter circle around each of the goals. The alleys. The alleys are next to the boxes on each end of the field and are very important to remember that when the referee blows a whistle and goes to restart play, he will ask the player to step into the alley before the whistle will be blown to restart. The alley is also very important, as coaches will ask defensive players to force the offensive player down the alley to keep them away from the goal area. The wing lines. These are where the two middies will be standing during face-off, as the third middie is facing off at the face-off point. The face-off spot, where the ball is placed for all face-offs. Face-offs are done at the beginning of the game, the beginning of the second half, and after each goal. GLE, or goal line extended. It's very important to know that this line is not actually visible on a field. It is an imaginary line that runs across the very front of the goal and extends out to the edge of the box. The in lines and the sidelines mark the boundaries of out of bounds. The substitution box. The substitution box is in between the two team benches and is the only area where a player can enter or exit the field during play. Some basic field rules. Each team must keep at least 4 players, including the goalie, in their defensive side of the field at all times. Each team must keep at least 3 players in the offensive side of the field at all times. Midfielders can roam freely from one end of the field to the next during regular game play. Face-offs. Again, you will notice the restraining lines are highlighted, and the restraining lines are very important during face-offs. The 4 defensive players will have to stay behind the defensive restraining line, and the 3 offensive players for each team will have to stay behind their restraining lines. The middies, as you see, are in the middle of the field. 2 are behind the wing lines. The other is at the face-off point. Everyone must stay in their areas until the face-off begins. Once the face-off starts and possession is gained by a team, the referee will yell possession, and at that time the teams can move beyond the restraining lines as long as they stay on their side of the midfield line. Again, notice the 4 defensive players are still on their half of the field, and the 3 offensive players are still on their half of the field. Offsides. If one of the players from a team let's look at the defensive side. You'll notice that there are 4 defensive players still on their side of the midfield line. However, if that one highlighted defender happens to cross over the midfield line, offsides will occur. If you look now, there are only 3 defensive players on their side of the field. Therefore, the offsides will be called. For this to happen, a defender is allowed to cross the midfield line. However, one of the midfielders must be on the other side of the line to maintain the 4 players on the defensive side. Substitutions. Again, we talked about the substitution box. All players must exit and enter the field through the substitution box when gameplay is occurring. In this example, you'll see there's a highlighted attack player on the blue team. If this player is being substituted for, they must immediately run as quickly as possible off the field on their side of the midfield line. Very important. Even during substitutions, you must maintain that the 4 defensive players are on their side of the field and the 3 offensive players are on their side. So when substituting, they must come off the field on their appropriate side through the substitution box. Once that player has exited the field as quickly as possible and crosses into the substitution box, the replacement player may then hustle out to take their spot. Shots on goal. When a shot is taken on goal but goes past the goal and out of bounds, the team that has the player closest to the ball when it goes out of bounds either gains or retains possession of the ball. This is very, very important because the closest person to a ball after a shot must run towards the ball as fast as they can with their stick extended to try to gain possession. Here are some examples. In this example, the red team, representing our opponent, and the blue team will represent our team. The red team has the ball, and their midfielder is just outside the box and decides to take a shot. As the midfielder takes the shot and it sails past the goal, you will notice that our goalie and closest defender should take off running towards that ball as it heads out of bounds. If they manage to beat the other team's attackmen and they are closest to the ball when it goes out of bounds, we will take over possession. Always, always hustle towards a shot as it heads out of bounds. In this example, we have the ball, and our midfielder takes the shot. You will notice as it sails by, our attackmen will run towards the ball as fast as possible, trying to beat out the opposing team's nearest defender and goalie. Again, if we are closest to the ball when it heads out of bounds, we will keep possession in the offensive end. Please remember, when running after the ball, you want to extend your stick out as far as you can because the very end of your stick will count towards an extension of your body. Passes are different. Passes that are missed and go out of bounds, automatically possession will go to the other team. Crease violation. Again, the crease is an 18-foot diameter circle around each of the goals. Offensive players are not allowed to enter the crease. If they step into the crease, a crease violation will be called and they will lose possession of the ball. Defensive players, however, can move freely from in and out of the crease without being called for any kind of violation. Serving penalties. When a team gets a penalty, that player must leave the playing field and kneel in the substitution box until the penalty time has expired. At the end of that penalty time, the timekeeper will yell, "Release," which signals the end of the penalty time. Since each team still needs to keep 4 players in their defensive end and 3 players in their offensive end, the team with a penalty will have to run with less players in the midfield area until the penalty time expires. Let's look at an example. In this example, the blue team representing us, one of our defenders gets called for a penalty. That defender must exit the field again on their side of the field, on their side of the midfield line and kneel down into the penalty box, otherwise known as the substitution box. They must stay kneeled down in the substitution box during the entire time of their penalty. If you look now, we do not have our 4 players still in our defensive end. So we must take one of our midfielders and replace that defender. And that midfielder must stay on the defensive side of the field until the penalty time expires and we go back to full strength. Advancing the ball. Anytime we gain possession of the ball in our defensive end, we have 20 seconds to move the ball across the midfield line. Once the ball has crossed the midfield line, we have an additional 10 seconds to step into the box with the ball. Any player can step into the box with the ball as long as it is done within 10 seconds of the ball crossing midfield. Once a player has stepped into the box with the ball, they may step back out and move freely around that area of the field, but they must step in within 10 seconds. Failure to do this will result in loss of possession. Okay, this was a real quick video just covering a couple of the key points to kind of get the basics of the game of boys lacrosse out to the new players and parents. Definitely did not cover everything. A lot more stuff will be covered during practices. However, I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video, and do not hesitate to ask coaches for clarity on any other topics or these topics during practice or games. Okay, good luck, and I hope you enjoy this great game of lacrosse.